you want to control as much as you can control, where you can program and curate the merchandise to adhere to the local community. So if you're doing Warby over here, Lulu over here, it creates a run, it creates momentum to continue that merchandising and to bring in the wine bar and the coffee and the restaurants and with a creative office or not, or residential above it. Like, you want to control the real estate collectively. I always like to say, like, when we go into a neighborhood, especially like that, you want to buy as much upfront as possible, because when people catch wind, it's over.
You have an incredible business story. And since I've known you, it's continued to evolve. And fun fact, you're the only podcast that we've had to re-record and redo. And it's kind of opportune because so much has happened since then. I feel like it's maybe a blessing in disguise. But maybe where we can start is just your early life story. Where did you grow up and how did that lead you to business and real estate?
Yeah, I mean, it's a wild journey and great to see you. This has been a reboot, a reset. So hopefully this will lead to better content for your viewers, but excited to be here. I live in New York City, married 22 years, 2 kids, Caleb, who I'm sure we'll talk about, 19, Zoe, 9, live in Manhattan on the Upper West Side, where I'm here today. Born in Greenwich, Connecticut. I think I'm ninth generation New Yorker now, living in the city. My dad was a banker for Bank of New York, moved to Chicago. He opened up a corporate office for them in Chicago. So moved to Chicago, went to high school there, and did a long-winded journey of a lot of soul searching when I was younger. It was a lot of off-roading, for my parents. Was huge into athletics and didn't really know real estate until late, college. Really kind of went into college with 2 things in mind: have fun and create relationships. And went to University of Kansas, where I met my wife, which was the best thing of going to that school is meeting her. But really fell into it. I actually had an internship as an A&R guy for Universal Studios. I was one of 13 people in the country that worked for Universal Music Group. And I was almost like an influencer before an influencer. So I was promoting CDs at the time. There were CDs to radio stations and record stores. And when the bands came in to Kansas City or St. Louis or even sometimes Chicago, I'd be in charge of that promotional tour. And the dream on that was, AR at the time and really finding that band. Got to meet many exceptional people, business minds from Universal Studios at the time. That was Interscope, DreamWorks, Universal Music Group, or Universal Records, Island Records. I mean, the largest in the world. So this went from Jay-Z to Eminem being released. So it was a wild ride that really taught me a lot about content marketing, narratives, really seeing new brands blow up and be worldwide success stories. I went to South by Southwest. I didn't enjoy spring breaks like my fellow peers did at school. And I worked at South by Southwest for Universal, making sure their bands and dinners and record release parties were a hit. It was an exceptional learning process for me. Ended up getting a job offer by DreamWorks, went out and just didn't feel it in my spirit of, it was one night at South by Southwest where, I saw all the drinking, all the partying, all that, all the babysitting for the bands, and went home and called my girlfriend, now my wife, and I said, I don't think I'm going to take this. It was going to be a move to actually their San Francisco office. I said, I just don't want to be this kind of guy. And there's something greater for me, I think, in the world. And she said, well, what do you think? I said, well, I love math, love real estate. We actually had a major in high school and I was an architecture major. So I've always been fascinated with design and real estate. So I think I'm going to try in commercial real estate, and didn't know anything about it and just started networking and got an internship for a large brokerage house, and that turned into a broker job, and that then turned into working for a developer on the leasing side, that then went to the development side, that then went to an investment side, and then that went to general growth properties and experiencing the largest bankruptcy in real estate history, that then got to be one of 3 or 4 people to take Rouse Properties public because to clear a lot of debt after GGP's bankruptcy. And then went to, being privatized after 5 years being public by Brookfield, that then went to the last public job of RPT and selling it, on a strategic sale last year to where I am now, which is we a co-owned investment platform that I launched 9 months ago with Bain Capital as a owner of our business, a part owner of our business, and a couple of large sovereigns, on a pretty large scale capital raising. So we're focused on open air retail from Seattle to San Diego, Boston to Miami, Texas, Nashville, Oklahoma, the smile, if you will.
What did you love about real estate when you didn't know anything about real estate at the beginning?
What's funny, and I was just thinking about this the other day. I remember I love hospitality, which I think is why you and I get along. And I tell this to a lot of people. I mean, if I was not in retail, I'd probably be on the hospitality side if I had a choice. I love service. I love hospitality. I love design. I love the back office. I love building. I love it all. I mean, I love seeing the smiles on customers' faces when they experience excellence at the highest level. But I remember being about 10, 11 years old and being in a vacation in Maui with my parents. We're walking on Kaanapali Beach and went to Whaley's Village. It was just wild. And it was on the water, it was restaurants, but it was mixed with shopping. And I turned to my parents at the time. They reminded me of this years ago. And I said, I want to do this when I get older. Fast forward, the company that owned that was GGP after a long while. So I ended up working for the company that owned that. But I've always been enamored. And even, like those kindergarten times where I think everybody has that, where you draw a picture of your older self of what you want to be. My drawing was a man that owns hotels. Fun fact, in our YPO forum, which we share at YPO, 3 of my forum mates, same thing.
What's that about?
I just have always loved it. I love the curiosity of seeing people enjoy themselves. I love serving people. I love seeing people with smiles, but I love, that curiosity of the wow of the finest details. Still, I mean, a recent book, but one of my favorite books was, Will Guidera's, book, which, hit on every single love language of mine, about the excellence, about culture, about unreasonable hospitality and the surprises and delights of wowing customers. I think the world's missing that. The world's missing that sense of awe and that sense of happiness and that sense of inspiration when they dine, when they go stay at an elegant hotel, when they go shop at an incredible place. It was on Miami Design District, Bal Harbor, and smell the flowers or the perfume they put in the airs, or see the LVMH's new design, and just get blown away. Like, I think fundamentally the world, like we can have a philosophy of like, if we can help change that one parcel or acreage that we own, we could help change that community, and that community can help change the cities. That city could be a light to the world, So it's always like thinking like big, but in small doses of, wow, 11 Madison, you're a server, but you could really change someone's life.
You're going to make memories.
100%. My memories as growing up were a lot of these hotel experiences. my parents didn't have a lot of money, but staying at Weston or whatever Marriott at that time was wow. Or that little sense of back in the day, the Kimptons where, you take my daughter to a Kimpton and there'd be a fish in a little aquarium waiting for her. Hey, welcome, Zoe. This is your friend for your visit. She still talks about that stuff. The smallest $2 fish is something she talks about 7 years later. It's just, I think the world has gotten away from the details and really obsessing on the smallest things. And to me, that's why I love retail real estate. That's why I love hospitality. It's like you strive for excellence and you practice excellence every day. I have a saying that I use a lot of the time and throughout my career. It's like, if you strive for excellence, you'll catch greatness. Might not be every time. And failing could be good if your eye is on excellence. And that's in the smallest, being on time for meetings. That's the smallest handwritten notes, thanking people rather than sending an email, or calling. It could be, remembering someone's birthday and sending them a book that you think that they would enjoy with a handwritten note inside of it. It's like those small things, I think, just carry so much gold, and it's just awesome. I think the world's with technology and everything, and no one's fault, but it's just so fast moving. Let's remember what got us here.
It's amazing. I mean, Hermes just passed LVMH in market cap pretty recently, and I've been a stockholder of Hermes for a little bit. And you talk about all these iconic brands. A common theme of whatever they do seems to be the experience or the nostalgia or the energy that they create with inside you when you walk in, whether it's, Apple, Hermes, Four Seasons, whatever you want to call it, the greatest hotel. And we're going through a transition right now, actually, in hospitality, which maybe you're hitting on, where the kind of middle that was very commoditized, I think similar to retail's issues maybe 7 or 8 years ago, a lot of this stuff is becoming obsolete, I think, and in many ways uninvestable.
I agree. It's, to me, it's you're striking mass merchants. You want to be Walmart, Costco, Target, or you want to be the best of the vertical, Lululemons, right? Nike, or that global brand like an LVMH, Hermes, even restoration. I mean, look at restoration. They started off, they've done a phenomenal job, right? Jerry took over and literally put them as a household name, with stores are now like whatever, and it's now F&B, it's yachts, it's hotels. It's brilliant. LVMH with Cheval Blanc, it's awesome. You see Dolce & Gabbana out in the Hamptons, they do a lot of promotions with gurneys. It's becoming, you want to catch her and him in everything they do, right? I think, I was just looking at this ad with Vuori, who I think's exceptional retailer. They just picked up Randy Gerber and Cindy Crawford, and it's the whole family. And I thought it was so genius because it took the young, or the boy, the daughter, the dad, the mom, and that speaks to everybody. And it was just lifestyle. It was them hanging on the beach and why they love, but while, and it was just, it's almost like a homemade movie that was like, this is pure genius. And, Vuori is a brand that just gets it. Restoration gets it. The luxury guys get it. Lulu gets it. And those are the brands that are absolutely thriving today and will continue to thrive. It's not looking at just at the four wall. It's looking outside and saying, how do I get inside your life and other aspects, other avenues to just maintain that loyalty and maintain that level of brand acknowledgement.
Do you think this idea of like experience or providing hospitality and other non-traditional hospitality uses is getting overused or it's completely untapped and we haven't even scratched the surface and there's a massive opportunity for people to actually do more. Like I think about like my brother-in-law, not a lot of people know this, owns the Paddock store in Miami in the design district. And you walk in there and if you're an average customer, you can't really buy anything. But they've created a whole bar and a whole experience to entertain you while you're there, whether they're selling you something or not, but they're getting to know you. So is that like overplayed now, or is that not even?
No, I don't think it's overplayed if it's done with that level of excellence. I think if people are just doing it to do it because they're copying their neighbors or friends or competitors, it's going to fail. But if it's authentic, if it's real, if it's got an angle, if it's good product, I mean, all it comes down to good is that, if it's coffee bars or, a regular bar, like what's, the design of it. If it's that level of excellence, like great. There are hokey things as we've all seen that like, okay, they're just trying to do this because others are doing it. But if it's that level of excellence and they're in the details and it's a +1, I mean, look at Kif, right? With the ice cream. I mean, they were early. They were early on this. Brilliant, right? The cereal and ice cream. And I mean, is that that's a wow factor that gets the kids in. It's all comes from a place of authenticity and passion and, customer service.
Let's go to GGP. What were you doing there and when did you realize something might be off?
I was leasing there, variety of different roles, I should say, throughout my career. This was GFC. This was over levered balance sheet in the highest way. And quite frankly, no one really saw it coming. If I were to be honest, we had a CFO who was loved by the street. And it was one of those lightning in the bottles that it's just got caught and GFC happened. And it was a moment that I'll never forget. It happened to be too. Our son is now 19. That was the year he got diagnosed with autism. So here I was with barely any money, with dealing with that and going, am I going to have a job? I'm dealing with something that has been a huge curveball thrown to my wife and I at the time, especially then when it's not as prevalent as now. And right then it was almost like survival. So no one saw it coming. I think it's like, I always believe you go through things for purpose and reason. And that led me to, to be part of a key core team at Rouse to help take that public, which was a large risk, but the greatest career risk I've taken in my career, to really help form a company and an entity and business plans and work with the banks. And I mean, it was nothing, right? And you had to turn on a light switch and one day you go public and the next day you're a publicly traded company. So all of that stuff, which is a lot of stuff that had to be put in place beforehand, was extreme, was an amazing stress, but incredible knowledge moment that I wouldn't trade for anything.
So GGP goes bankrupt. You then go work for a private company that you're going to take public. Why would you want to go through that?
So I was still part of GGP and they were spinning off Howard Hughes to clear debt and Rouse. So I was still a GGP employee, but I was tasked to be one of 3 at the time people to, you're thrown off the ship. You're going to take this $2.5-3 billion company, Rouse, public. They're bad malls that need to be repositioned to something better, residential, hotels, whatever, redevelopment. And it might go public, it might not. It ended up going public January 6, 2012. So I was a GGP, to be fair, I was a GGP employee up until that day. And then that turned on and we were publicly traded company. RSC ticker symbol, and, a tremendous team. You had a good run there, and got privatized, and ran it there for Brookfield for a couple of years. And then the RPT job came along, and just decided it was a really interesting opportunity.
What was Rouse doing when you were there? What were they investing in?
We were doing, at that time, malls were not what they are today. Kind of our thesis was only game in town, secondary markets, or larger land sites in California where we could master plan, redevelop into 900 unit residential facility in Fremont, California on the Bay, Carlsbad, California, Chula Vista, California, Hayward, then in the East Bay, and in San Francisco. So really kind of taking neglected assets and trying to turn them into lemonade, but really looking at the ground and imagining what should be here today. In a lot of cases, again, this was a tremendous team that we were part of, but, taking deals at $20 million book values, repositioning, turning them into open air centers, there's one in Minneapolis where it's a $20 million book value, we put $27 million of redevelopment into it and repositioning it into, your home goods and Cub Foods and Chipotle's and fast casual and more of your targets of the world. And, sold for under $7 million. It was an unbelievable execution. Did the same thing in Eugene, Oregon with a mall that was called Gateway Mall, and repositioned it all into open air. So just stuff like that, where it's all about the basis. It's all about getting it cheap enough, thankfully our book values were really cheap. So we could afford to redevelop and get that incremental yield and then sell it for 6 caps or 5.5 caps, whatever the market did. So that's kind of our specialty of kind of only game in town, master plan, redevelopment type.
How did real estate change in your eyes after the great financial crisis?
Path for quality. The better got better and the weak got weaker. And that middle just got crushed of asset quality. That BC, I think COVID escalated that too, especially in our sector. But frankly, probably all sectors, office, certainly. But yeah, hotels as well. And just, people are like, the malls dying. I'm like, you're absolutely wrong. Certain malls are dying. Neglected malls are dying. Malls that are not supposed to be built are dying. The Ala Moanas of the world, the Bell Harbors of the world, the Aventures of the world are growing cash flow. I would imagine as fast as they've ever grown cash flow ever, because a lot of their competition are falling off. That market share is going to that. So it's a fine balance, right? Like, I've always been a value add, opportunistic, kind of contrarian type investor. And now it's like, I think you got two barbells where it's like you want to either, get the right basis and buy that opportunistic redevelopment story, or focus on the best quality and dominant market share and just continue to add, and curate and merchandise those centers.
Do you think that securitization of real estate, particularly like triple net or net lease real estate, and who the buyers were of those stocks or assets, contributed to that collapse of a lot of the malls and a lot of the retail? Because the ones that you listed, just like thinking through my head, I think there's still, a lot of them are still owned by families, or still owned by the entrepreneur that created it. Bell Harbor Design District, the Caruso stuff in California. But a lot of other malls, if they're owned by a pension and they just thought they weren't going to have to do anything except clip a coupon, are probably smoked. Is that a connection?
I think that's some of it. I mean, you have some tremendous operators out there still, like Simon Property is the best. They are behemoth. They have incredible assets, incredible malls, and are the dominant mall player in the world in both luxury malls, outlets, all that, right? So there are public companies, that being one. Research is great too. But I think some of those others, like you said, maybe some of the insurance, and they just didn't realize how long the hold would be. They didn't realize how much capital it would be. They didn't realize how you have to invest. It might not make that initial return on that one deal, but those 7 deals after that, you'll get 3x. It takes people like David Simon or that to really understand the long-term vision and the capital needed and surround themselves with long duration capital. Publicly traded deals at evergreen type, forever hold, right? Family office is forever hold. They're not looking at it quarter to quarter. The best aren't, but they're looking at long duration and having 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, 20 year, holds. And so that I think it has played a part of it. And I think, for a while, malls continued to be in early 2000s, they were the darlings of the public REITs. And they provided year after year, 4 or 5% NOI growth, like boom, 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 that compounded growth over any sector. And life's, the world's changed dramatically. And some got wiped out, the spinoff of Washington Prime, CPL. And it just created, like, where I went back to is this separation of state where you have excellent companies like Simon that took the long term. They saw their stock dip in COVID. They didn't panic. They didn't react. They knew what the real estate they had. They kept investing in the retailers. They kept the open dialogue with them. They partnered with them. And, now they have some of the best malls in the world.
So at the time of COVID, you were an RPT. You came out of a period where a lot of malls were dying. How did you think about strategy and positioning when you were running the show at that point?
I mean, thankfully, it was interesting. My CFO at RPT, Mike Fitzforrest, was at GGP with me. He was on the finance side. That's a kid. We were, during the GFC. So we talked about that a lot, and a lot of the same principles of what not to do back then and what to do now. Don't panic. Communicate. Collaborate. Partner with our retailers. And communicate and partner with our shareholders. It's something no one has gone through a pandemic. We looked at our brother and we looked at the top. I had weekly calls with, top global CEO type that were seeing stuff throughout the world, which was great. And just listening to best practices, sharing very open best practices that we were doing, right or wrong. And that helped me, but just stayed the course. But Jake, I tell you, during that time, again, like, come back to like the contrarian investment mindset and really looking at like the Warren Buffetts of the world and kind of hanging on like, 2 quotes that I love and throughout my career is, buy when others are fearful, sell when others are greedy. And Wayne Gretzky, skate with puck's gonna be, not with puck's at.
Harder said than done.
Very hard.
Or easier said than done.
And you'll have pain, sleepless nights when you're making those investments. Always. But like we did in March, April, we did a deal with GIC in 2019 and closed in December 19, which seeded us 5 assets with a lot of money, $250 million of equity on the forward carry to provide us.
Is this the start of RPT?
This was the start of my RPT. Yeah. So I had to change what was an image of a family run, but public for 30 years, Midwest based, 7 whatever multiple type company, and inject some life, change the culture, change the cash flows. And our balance sheet was in really rough shape. So how do I do that? The other thing, the only way to do it is you kind of have to bring in other people's money. You're not going to issue equity to dilute your shareholders. And so that was a time, right, where retail was still a 4-letter word. Malls and open air were kind of they were mirrored together. And after I spent 6 months of really building with our partners throughout the organization at RPT, who were tremendous, best of class institutional practices of investment committees and lease governance and audits and resetting the board, resetting the C-suite, pivoting, all that branding, all the changes. After that 6 months, it was green time of go. And to me, that was going to find like a sovereign or a pension and help them come in and partner where we could be a balance sheet for them and help them with what we thought would be a best-in-class operating team and investing team. And together we could create something. So it was like 100 meetings, 99 or probably 100 of 100 were like, no, get out. This is retail. Had a lot of relationships just from Rouse and Brookfield days. We just kept on going and going. Some by myself, some with bankers, and just really took a liking to GIC of their global reach, their sovereign, largest real estate sovereign in the world.
Did you go to Singapore or
no?
do they
Just
have
in
an
New York.
office in
They
the
have an
US?
office in New York. They're kind of U.S. or America's headquarters is in U.S. And I just did like white papers and just listen. It wasn't sales mode. What do you guys like? What do you guys don't like? Have you been in retail? Why don't you like it? Why don't you like it? And it was like a courtship, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. I remember having coffee with them and just walking around the block sometimes. And it was that persistence of curiosity, that persistence of, hey, if you get a sovereign into the stock, certainly it would catalyze the company, but it would be good for the whole sector. At that time, sovereigns weren't in the space for forever. So it looked like we would end up getting them. And then December, we finalized the document and closing. And then COVID happened and we're sitting on all this cash. And I just went in and just was researching and talking to the retailers. And I said, you know what? This is going to be a catalyst for our sector. And because I think supply chains are going to be backed up. There's going to be, ship from store, buy online, pick up from store, curbside pickup, all this stuff. We're sitting in our place in East Hampton where we vacated the city, and Amazon would take 2 weeks. I'll never forget that. Target and Walmart, same day, where you go, drive to Riverhead and pick up your stuff. And Target and Walmart apps were never on my phone. Now they are. And I just wrote, with the team, kind of white paper, and we sent it to GIC, sent it to my board, and I said, this is the time I think we go all in. And they thankfully agreed. And collectively, we put a lot of capital work. We pivoted and made Boston our second highest MSA. We were
Why
buying
Boston?
stuff. It's always been a high barrier of limited retail inventory, owned by families, owned by pensions. Quite honestly, during that time, people were scared, rightly so. And we were the ones, really only ones buying. And so, Jake, that time period of 20 and 21, we were the largest open air buyers in the country. I mean, I think in 2020, we beat Blackstone. Only time I probably ever will on an AUM game for a year.
Did that make you uncomfortable?
I just had that firm belief, I was like, we're right. And the more, I love learning. I love reading. I love podcasts. And we had a lot more time on the hands because you weren't commuting, right? And so I was just researching. And like, this is going to impact offices. So what's going to be impacted on this is the neighborhood grocery centers. Okay, Starbucks, instead of having 100,000 people in that 3-mile radius, okay, if all these people stay home and the average worker, 2 in a house or 1 in a house in Westchester County, New York, I'm like, oh my God, this could go to like 500,000 or 400,000 people and flow and that daytime worker and Panera's. And certainly there'll be some cash flow disruption for a little bit, but this could be the beneficiary, suburban, not urban, suburban retail could be the beneficiary of a lot. And we saw that with grocery. We saw that with QSRs. Fitness was shut down for a while. Theaters have been, I think, permanently impaired, right? Not to say they're going to go out of business, but not as many theaters, I think everybody agrees, 2 years from now. It's just a gut feeling, and the more I sent and very open and got wisdom from a great board, got wisdom from great investors like GIC, what are you seeing across the world and in their world and Europe and Asia. And we had that at our fingertips. And I'm like, so it wasn't a fearful. It was like this is gonna rip. And it did. And it was a great time. I mean, thankfully, we put a lot of money on the line. It allowed us to reposition the company, which then allowed us to do a strategic sale to Timco and be the largest multiple expansion in that 5-year period of any open air REIT, which was, again, a collective team effort. Everybody bought into the culture, everybody into the high-paced environment of which we operate in. Everybody brought into the stewardship and the discipline. We had a tremendous board. We had tremendous investors and shareholders that were supportive of a turnaround. And it was awesome and resulted in a win-win for RPT shareholders and Kimco shareholders. Kimco guys are dear friends and they're continuing to thrive as the largest open-air REIT in the country. So it was an awesome period, awesome tenure, and just to look back with with a lot of smiles and deep admiration from a great team. It was a team.
What makes for a spectacular open air center?
It comes out of real estate, right? If you have a great looking center on the wrong side or the wrong area of it's just gonna be it's a great looking center that doesn't produce. You want to have the great real estate first and foremost. You want to have that frequency of visitation, and by frequency, like we look at it from morning to night. You want to curate and have people there, from 6 a.m, for their fitness classes to late at night, the restaurants, and you want to have that daily needs. Whole Foods, ideally Trader Joe's, Publix, we love down in Florida, as the daily driver for stability, because the retailers, the small shops want anchors by them that drive the foot traffic. So every neighborhood's different. We're bringing big in data. We had a data scientist. I think we're the only one in our sector that had data scientists. Abby, she was at exceptional. We created like kind of a proprietary model where it looked at each center and provided risk and opportunities, but also investments. So all those deals we did, we collectively built this thing and it gave us data to kind of, provide a governor to our financial review, but also our gut review and also our just market research, where if all those things were neutral and this thing was high or low, it might provide us just a little bit more comfort to do the deal or not do the deal. Data is the new oil. And I think now it's tremendous, especially in our sector and all real estate, just what we have the capabilities on, phone, to look at credit card data to see how many people had been there the last hour, 2 hours, the video cameras that could tell you gender, demographics, all that. We do events, farmers markets, how many people come. Okay, are they coming on a Saturday, a Sunday at 2:00 or 10:00? What gets better? Is it younger? Is it older? You could just obsess over these details, which is a blast. But it's just going to get higher and higher if there's more capabilities that are our fingertips. I think like AI, for example, it's just It's so, we're such at like the first or second inning, people don't realize. And it's going to be such an unbelievable tool, I think, to mitigate a lot of risks. We're going to mitigate a lot of data entry errors, mitigate a lot of market pick selection errors, and is it going to disrupt jobs? Certainly. Is it going to make us better investors? Absolutely. And so we're all in on that, which is exciting. And I think just so running at it's just such a warp speed that, again, we're a first or second inning.
What retailers in your experience did you see picking the best locations, whether they were using data or other things? Like, who does it the best? Where if you were going to be a follow-on retailer, you're like, I'm opening up wherever this guy's going. Who is that guy?
I mean, it's interesting. Like in the suburban areas, Whole Foods has always been awesome, right? Starbucks has always been great. Like, where Starbucks location was, Chase Bank's always had great things because, they had the data. They knew where their private wealth people were living. It's all, the Lululemons and the catalog. So these people are using data to find the real estate. It's like they'll look at things and go, okay, in Dallas, we have 3 stores or 2 stores. Our online penetration shows X, Y, and Z to the north, and Frisco is a whole for us. Let's put a store. And they immediately go and say, who's got the best real estate in that area? And that's how they, really get it. I mean, real estate, they have real estate teams, but it's the data of the consumers that are driving the business. Warby Parker was always interesting. They went into kind of like those emerging areas and the emerging districts before anybody. I would think like them and Blue Bottle. It's like the hip, cool zones of, I mean, they were early innings at Wynwood, right? I mean, early, I think. They were skating where the puck was going to be, not where the puck's at.
So when you think about places like, I'll give a local example. So I live in Fort Lauderdale. I'm in Fort Lauderdale now. We have Las Olas Boulevard. It's like a big retail shopping area. Warby Parker's there. Yeti's there. Lulu's there, but it's kind of like about it. Then it's like mixed with like really C-class, D-class retail. And it never caught fire to some of the stuff like in Palm Beach, Miami, or even Del Rey. Like, what goes wrong in those types of settings? And are they actually opportunities for someone like you?
Yeah, I think there are definitely opportunities. What the Palm Beach went right is you had usually in design districts, certainly you had Los Olas has fractured ownership. So buildings owned by different people. Each person has a different investment appetite. You want to control as much as you can control, where you can program and curate the merchandise to adhere to the local community. So if you're doing Warby over here, Lulu over here, it creates a run, it creates momentum to continue that merchandising and to bring in the wine bar and the coffee and the restaurants and with a creative office or not, or residential above it. Like, you want to control the real estate collectively. And I think the choppiness of, an individual at Del Rey, for example, started buying up the downtown area. And I was that one individual that really curated that whole area. But if it's fractured, you can only do your deals. And if other sellers are not going to sell, you run into a stop sign where you're like, crap, I own 2 buildings. My thesis was buying 20, 30. I can't crap these, or they're asking too much and my returns don't justify. But I've hit you hit a roadblock. So it's, I always like to say, like, when we go into a neighborhood, especially like that, you want to buy as much upfront as possible, because when people catch wind, it's over.
Wynwood. So it happened.
100%.
Yeah. Let's talk about team. You took this Midwest company. It's in New York. You have to completely revitalize it. How did you do that?
To me, this is, it's so fun. It was hard. We had to make some difficult decisions at first on people. but keeping a Detroit office and a New York office and not saying one's back office and one's headquarters, but we're together as one. Going to the Detroit office saying, I believe in you. Here's our vision. Everybody wants vision. Everybody wants to see where they're going. Without vision, it's like nothing happens and you don't get the buy-in. With vision, sets goals and really sets a bar for them to execute on. So, we went in and said, this isn't going to be for everybody. There's going to be people here. This is day 2 that are not going to be at this company. I'm not going to be the CEO saying everything's going to be hunky-dory because it's going to be challenging. We're going to have to do things differently in an environment that's constantly changing. But to be that authentic person up front and to really get that buy-in where it's not all going to be rosy. But, to really put and say, it started June of 2018. And I said then, this is a company where I truly want you to flourish within the 4 walls of the office, but at home too. And you are going to have balance. And with that, I did a mandatory work from home Friday.
All year?
All year. And this was 18, and we didn't have cloud systems. And I tell you what a blessing it was of if we didn't do this and COVID hit, publicly traded company, it would have been massively problems. So we bought everybody laptops that didn't have them. They had a little allowance to have, their right share at home and really breathe life into that with the notion of if someone's not doing their job, this is going to get pulled. Like, this is about trust. This is about executing at the highest level. This is about, you know what? We're going to work past your usual work hours sometimes. We're going to give you trust. And it worked. And, we went in and got a new office space and let the team help design it. Like I was huge in, we gave them parameters, but they brought in like Michigan Furniture Company. There's a local, beautiful, actually autism organization called Friendship Circle, where we bought a lot of paintings from autistics that did that. The money went back into their individual care. Everything was Michigan based. And there was a team assigned to it. And we'd had weekly meetings and they were so excited to be a part of designing something, which was more, they're right. The first day or second day there too, after that town hall, there was a executive wing, which the former CEO had an office almost bigger than my entire New York office, literally. And this executive wing had a door that you needed a different pass to get in. And sitting with some of the other people that were not in that executive wing, there were people in 20 years that never been down that. Literally. Like, it's crazy. And it was the old wooden antique type, Mad Men type, structure and the wooden boardroom table in the CEO's office. I'm like, all right, I could sit out in a cube. I don't care about this stuff. And so I purposely loudly said to everybody in the cubes outside there, I said that Deanna was my head of HR. Deanna, I'm going to Home Depot and I'm buying an axe. She's like, what? So I'm knocking down these doors. She's like, we can't do that. We don't own the building and we'll get someone to come up and remove them. And I said, okay, please do. And next day we moved and we had all these like treats down the hallway. And I went around and just invited everybody. I said, we're one, is this it's 3 letters behind my name. What does CEO mean? To me, we're all the same. We're humans, and we're in this together and we're going to build this together. We're going to create, hopefully, exceptional results. We're going to do the impossible. And we're going to build a brand that everybody can tell their kids and grandkids to be proud of. And just continually just you had that buy-in. But it came down to, I think, authenticity and setting goals and ambitious ones and holding people accountable. And like I said, this wasn't I mean, I had a tremendous team that have gone on. Some are with me at 11North. Some have gone to do big things at other public companies. And it was just blessed. It was some of the most fun I've had in my career and was extremely fortunate.
You struck me as very entrepreneurial when you were at a publicly traded company. We almost did two deals together. And in all the interactions with your team, it didn't feel like a public company. It felt like an entrepreneurial go-getter company. How was that handled within the context of a public environment where a lot of companies don't act that way?
Yeah, I think it's all about institutional practice and governance, which you need guardrails. So behind that entrepreneurial curtain, there was a big institutional wall that you didn't see in the governance and the checks and balances and, obsessive, investment memos and investment committees, audit committees, a tremendous chief accounting officer with a tremendous accounting team. So it was maybe entrepreneurial in the face, but behind some really big guardrails that were stewarding shareholders' money. But I think some of the best CEOs in the spaces, we've talked a lot about, some of those global retailers were entrepreneurs. Gary at Restoration, Steve Jobs. I mean, these are, icons that always had a curiosity of asking a lot of questions and why and challenging the status quo. There are a lot of publicly traded companies that are functioning extremely well that just need a steward, a captain to keep the ship straight, right? We were in a company that needed life, needed a reset, was dwindling at a low multiple and in a disrupted time too with retail, right? So I think it's a different shape, different folks, and there's tremendous corporate citizens running great publicly traded companies. They're doing exceptionally well. So we had that entrepreneurial spirit, but an institutional background that guarded our shareholders' capital, with our lives and treated other people's money as if it was our own. Yeah, and great discipline.
Are you able to enjoy it more now that you're a private company and do you want to keep it that way?
Yeah, I mean, we're having a great time. We're getting some great real estate. Listen, I fundamentally believe in, our type of product. I would argue your type of product is meant for the private markets, not the public markets.
Look at the REIT stocks.
Exactly.
The hotel REIT stocks.
Yeah, not all. Like, to me, public markets are meant for triple nets, right? AFFO growth. It's all about AFFO growth. Less CapEx, durable income streams, predictable. The street doesn't like shock. If Joann's or Michael's or all these bankruptcies come out, the open air REITs are doing a phenomenal job of replacing those tenants with Lululemon, Warby Parker, or REI, more modernized retailers. But what happens is, cash flow drops and it takes a year to put those tenants back in. Your street won't credit you until those tenants are open. So it's like this constant flow of a lot of great income coming in, but retailers that blow out, your cash flow comes down. That's why you look at some of the top retail REIT stock over 10 years and there hasn't been a lot of growth. It's not to sit there and say they've all done phenomenal. It's just a lot of capital going in and a lot of cash flow going backwards with inside. And you need to live and breathe and curate daily and go. It's interesting. It's like, I did this analogy recently where if you're placing an LA Fitness at a center, the street won't give you credit if you replace it with Trader Joe's, Apple, Lululemon. But Eastil or JLL or CBRE will give you instant credit when the lease is signed. Like, that in itself shows you the wrapper because all capital is wrapper, right? The type of wrapper that our product needs to be stewarded by, long-term, long duration type capital. Will there be buy, fix, flips? 100%. That's great. 2-year, 3-year, 1-year type deals. Yeah. But for the most part, it's that public. It's also, you could be a lot more creative in private.
What are you looking at today at 11 North?
Looking at all shapes and sizes, from public stuff down to in Florida and your neck of the woods to, we have some really interesting stuff, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Lululemon type stuff under contract in the South. City TBD then out soon, hard on that money, and we'll close in 45 days or so, to some big other things, portfolios, both big and small. I mean, we're looking at $20 million deals, $50 million deal, have under contract on Long Island and tremendous real estate, to, large portfolios of several $100 million. This isn't an AUM game for us. This is let's build for excellence. Let's build a great portfolio. We have a lot to put out, but there's no obsessiveness of putting that capital out just to put it out. Like, we've been very disciplined. We've had opportunities of last looks to buy a lot, but we've held our discipline to kind of go up, and I think it's proof right, just based on the kind of the fall off of April 2nd,
How is all that macro noise and news impacting your long-term investment style?
I mean, I go back to like the longer duration. And what's different about this, it was different about COVID, you could sensitize cash flows and say, if everybody's not paying rent, zero. Like, if 25%, or if the grocery stores, I think they're all going to pay rent because they're thriving, right? You could just take the grocery. So it can I say easily, took a while, but come up with 100 different analyses of who's going to pay rent. This is different. This is tariff world. We don't know how long. You're looking at vendors of, you could say maybe furniture. Where is it produced? China, Vietnam, they kind of a tariff analysis. But from a fundamental cash flow, it's been very difficult to say the impact of, small shop tenants, independent, surely will get hit, but how much? And so it's like, what kind of reserve do you do, and really go from there? But we were coming back to your long-term bid, we're taking a long-term approach, and this is an asset class our LPs like a lot. We like a lot. We're long-term investors, and we see this opportunity when the REITs have traded off as a great opportunity to deploy, hopefully, a lot of capital. Prior to April 2nd, it was about the hottest I've ever seen it in my career, probably the hottest. You have more capital in the sector than I've ever seen, from pension, sovereign, private equity, REITs at the time. We were losing 9.9 out of 10 deals, just some cases you have 20 offers. It was a gold rush. Frankly, stuff I'm not, it was unused to, you want to buy out things people don't see. You don't want to be in a bidding war, and to me, like, what value is that to pay $1 higher than the next highest bid? And so it created a lot of uncomfortability to me. We chased it. I don't know if you and I talked about this, but we chased we were the cover bid on the ROIC deal. This is all public, $4.2 billion REIT. We're working bilaterally with the board, and worked 4 months, spent a lot of money, and got a call one day from our friends at a very famous investment bank saying, you're finally unlocking this, which is a good thing. The bad thing is a couple of your friends are going to be entered the room, which I understood they had to do. It's a publicly traded company. We had 2 weeks to firm up our bid. Then you have to get, if you're selected to a best and final, get in the best and final. You negotiate a merger agreement. They wanted this the Friday. They're going to announce the deal Monday. Merger is Monday. in my head, I'm like, okay, we're spending months on this. So this is getting down to the wire. And obviously I'm like, I could be flying out to their headquarters Monday to make sure their team's good and introduce me and calm nerves. You didn't get a phone call back and you saw Blackstone beat us by a buck. That's kind of started a lot of this re-rating, if you will, of open air, which good for them. We have so many friends there and they're the best of the best, but that was a bummer to lose. That would have been a big win, but things happen and not meant to be. And LA's dealt with a lot since that deal with the wildfires and now tariffs, all that. So
How do you deal with something like that? Losing it for a buck? I mean, that
the bucket
sucks after
price,
putting 4 months in.
dollar price, which is a lot, share price. I had to mentally prepare to lose it and had to mentally prepare the team and our investors. Thankfully, I remember talking to our consortium and saying, a bad day for us would be losing this, spending millions of dollars and losing, and no one knows about it. Here's a business we just launched. Here's capital we just closed. We just stood up $4.2 billion of enterprise value. That's equity and debt, all SASB financing, which is a feat in itself. And again, this is a team. This is an individual. This is a tremendous team that did this. And literally like 2 days later, a leak went out on Reuters saying our name of the firm is up against Blackstone trying to privatize this company. And, that leak has really helped deal flow. Like I can't even put into words on how much. That's why we're buying what we're buying now is you're in the flow of large deals.
You're in the ring
small
with Mike
deals.
Tyson.
Yeah, this is all public in the proxy, all that. And to lose against the best was an honor. It sucked. But honestly, Jake, I got the call that, or found out that it was going to go to them. And I was just on to the next, because what do you do? And I think having that son with special needs, it's everything in perspective, works easy. Like the home life can be, or dealing with difficulties that are out of your control is hard. And so it's always putting things in perspective. I love to compete. With competing, you're going to lose. And that's a reality of life. Hopefully you get more W's on the board than losses. But the best of the best, from Jordan to Kobe Bryant to Steph Curry to Eli Manning to Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, have lost plenty of games. And to lose with grace and dignity and, but to be an example of head down and your team knowing like you're personally cold calling for the next deal. So it stopped, but it turned out to be a really good thing. Not doing
One of the things that has connected us, I think, is your love for family, your prioritization for your family, and how kind and generous of a person you are. And I do think that what you've had to deal with in your life with your family has shaped a lot about who you are. And I wonder if you could share a little bit and talk about what that has done to your life and how it's transformed your outlook on everything else.
Yeah. Caleb's 19. Him and Zoe are the light of my wife and I lied. He was diagnosed with autism at 2. He's 19 now. We've endured a lot. So he isn't developed of both, cognitively. So he's more of like 5-year-old maybe now, 4. Through, that 2 to currently, there's been stages of unbelievable success to unbelievable regression to setbacks to to laughter to celebrating little things to crying at night going, I don't know how collectively how we're going to get through this, to him having, aggression outbursts, against my wife or daughter or me, to, knocking on the walls all night. And then you have to go the next morning to do an earnings call that you've been preparing for 2 weeks on, you haven't slept, which again, not hard on me. It's thinking of my son, and I'm not doing enough to help him. And so I've been on the board since Autism Speaks for a long time. I was chairman of the board from April 20. I mean, you can't make that timing up of till last year. And so a lot of older guys on the board really taught me and they taught me life. They taught me how to lead a family. They taught me things they did that they wish they didn't do. These are icons. These are like the Bob Wrights of the world, who were CEO of NBC, that founded Autism Speaks. I mean, he was the one that, after a very, trying COVID period of 2020, when our son's at home, he's like, I think you gotta look at a village. You're trying this all by yourselves. Our grandson is flourishing at the school called Center for Discovery up in the Catskills. That was a light for me to really explore that. It was never in my vocabulary, never in my mind, certainly not my wife's mind. Again, this is like, he's 4 years old. When he's crying at night, who's going to tuck him in? It's mom or dad. Like, it's, people are always like, oh, it's like boarding school. I'm like, I just want to punch you in the face. You have no idea. Try dropping your 3 or 4 or 5-year-old off. But we went up for this visit at the school, and it was one of the most inspiring places I've ever been. 1,000 acres, organic farms, equine, whole holistic thing, 385 kids, 1,300 staff. It's like Disney World. Like, everybody's smiling. They see the gold in every single kid. Really some complex situations that they've turned around, and the testimonies behind that were amazing. They have a huge nutritional program that actually Caleb was on before, that was all lifestyle and nutrition and eating right. And the gut for kids with autism is very important, and kind of equalizes them on behavior, sleeping. And
how do you do that for someone that's like a 4 or 5-year-old, but that's a 19-year-old? I mean, I just know that from my own kids. You can't tell a 4-year-old what to eat. It's hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's you prepare only what they can eat, right? So you only put they're not touching anything they can't get their hands on. So my wife, I'd like to say I did a lot. It was not the case at all. My wife was just very into health and nutrition for him, and understood that the gut microbes are very important to be in alignment. And finding the school with exactly and better knowledge of this than us was like gold. It was a lottery ticket. The 2-year process to get in. It's state and Fed paid. We got a call, and it was sadness, to be honest, because it was like, this is real. He's not going to be here. This isn't right. We went through all the emotions over the course of his life with us, and therapy and all that. 90% divorce rates, huge alcoholism, some real big stuff. And I'm like, how do you put, again, institutional guy, like, how do I put guardrails to not have that, right? And so date nights every Saturday night for my wife and I, therapy. I gave up drinking. It's never been a problem. But a mentor who was on the board said, every day is your Super Bowl. Every day is Tom Brady. And Tom Brady's not drinking for the Super Bowl. You got thrown a curveball. And a lot of people go off the side and cope with drinking. And again, never been an issue, right? I loved a scotch. I loved a glass or two of wine. I had my fun in college. After college, it's been a full sprint work. I'm no better than anybody else. That 90% of alcoholism is not better than me. I'm not better than that, I should say. And so to me, I'm going to drink in 10 years. And that's just been one thing that I work through, that I'm like, I want to be my best self to my son, my family, my daughter, and others, but I want to be present. and I don't want to be, because we had to endure some really difficult things. And one was just dropping off at that school, which is still a very traumatic experience, but it's turned into gold. He's flourishing. The school is absolutely tremendous. I just went on their board a few months ago. We just had his gala and at Cipriani's here in the city the other night. The school raised $4.2 million, which is a massive amount. It's a stunning, stunning facility. They are seeing so many people's lives change and in turn families' lives changed. And they had me for life. They have my life for life. It is unlike anything I've experienced in any aspect of society. And they've created magic. And, we've endured a lot. But what Caleb has made me as a better man, a better husband, a better leader, a better dad, I think, a better friend. And it's taught me a lot on empathy, a lot on, you don't know what people are carrying into the office every day. If someone's in a bad mood, what happened? So it teaches me to react slower than faster, to be an ear. And for many years, I was silent on Caleb's diagnosis. And it really wasn't until I went on the board of Autism Speaks, which was a larger platform, that I was become more vocal on. And it really to help a lot in the real estate sector across the world, that here there's CR advocacy doing amazing things with different organizations. It's allowed me to be what others were for me. And that was, don't do what I did. This, do this, don't do this, look at this, look at over here, provide their lives with my wife. It's a village that, profound autism is a village that, it's a club that you didn't expect, you didn't want to be in, And once you're in that club, it becomes a very tight-knit circle. And there's global CEOs of, top 50 companies that we're now friends with that have kids with autism. And I like to say that those parents, especially the moms, are superheroes. And I would take them in a street fight over a Navy SEAL any day of the week, because they've had to advocate, they've had to yell, they got to speak up for their kids. The amount of advocacy you have to do for the cities or the states to get your kid placed in some of these schools, it's crazy. For insurance, for all that, like it's trying. And to put that on top of other people's daily lives and jobs and all that is a lot. But, like I said, from other things, I believe things happen for a reason. I think, we all have callings in life, and this was something that, hopefully I can have a platform that could help a lot of others. And maybe not endure a lot of things we had to go through, because it was a lot different back then. I mean, now it's so much more support, so much more visibility, so much more resources, both financially and emotionally. But yeah, that's life in a nutshell. Our daughter is I think a future president of the United States. She's so empathetic. Imagine her, she's 9, has a 19-year-old brother that is kind of like a 4 or 5-year-old. So he's 6'3", 6'4", and towers over her, but acts like her little brother. And someone that doesn't live with us, but we see pretty much every weekend. And, emotionally for her, seeing stuff from the time she was born, she's seen a lot that no 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old should see. And so she's just an exceptional young lady that is thriving at her school, both academically and athletically, and sees a kid in the corner sitting by herself or himself and is pulling them into her circle, and sees disabilities as not as a disability, but focuses on their strengths and sees the gold. So she's special.
I'm sure there's been times where you've reacted in a certain way to something your son was doing, and obviously it's not his fault, and probably upset you, or you became frustrated over your own behavior upon reflection, but obviously not in the moment. How do you learn to forgive yourself? Because I think that's a common thing that you've had to experience probably way more than most people, but that a lot of dads have to experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like it's a journey, and it's forgiveness. It's self-reflecting. It's, meditation. Faith is a big part of our lives, and having that as a foundation has certainly helped. But to me, it's like you go through a lot, and you're going to get a lot wrong. But holding yourself accountable, or holding yourself up to that standard, but also like literally closing your eyes and just forgiving your old self. Your new self is forgiving your old self, has really helped me. And again, having mentors or having people that have just spoken great light into my life has made all the difference. And being vulnerable and saying, yeah, I screwed up on this, I acted like this, or I yelled at him or my wife or daughter because he was acting like this, or or just even down to the things of like, I wanted to be a little league coach, and that's not happening, or it's a different happening. And so childhood dreams or young dreams didn't turn out the way it was going to be, but focusing that, I don't want to even call it negativity, but what the positivity is, and the attributes he is, and the fact that he still hugs and kisses my cheek and has that childlike faith and act and simplicity and love, and and gentleness is such an amazing feeling. Focusing on the mold and not the negativity. Otherwise, if you just focus on the negativity, you can go to a really dark place. Hence the results of all the stats I've given you.
Let's bring it home. I ask all the guests on the podcast the same closing question, and you clearly have good taste, good design sense. So I'm really looking forward to this answer. But what is your favorite hotel?
I loved Cheval Blanc at St. Bart's. It was just, the experience there, but at that time, we went from our 20th anniversary, and just those achievements for 28, especially after, all those stats I gave you. We love it. There's so many I love I can list for that, but that's got to be tops.
It's amazing. We were just in St. Bart's. The place is one of a kind. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks, bye.
Hey, everyone. It's Jake here. Thanks again for joining me on this conversation. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Lastly, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Jake Wurzak. I'll see you in the next episode.
Jake Wurzak is the founder and CEO of Dove Hill Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Jake and his guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Dove Hill Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not reflect or represent real estate, financial, or investment advice.